Now, you don't need money to do that. All you need is hustle. In the initial days of Uber, the founding team manually onboarded each black cab driver. Manually, each of them, right? In the initial days of Tinder, you got the app downloads by actually organizing parties on campus. All of this was manual. There was a bouncer who wouldn't let you inside the frat house until you downloaded the app. That is exactly how it all started. So all of this needs some of these need some capital. You need some server costs, etc. But it does not need massive amounts of capital.
So guys, today we have with us Akul. Akul has been working with a VC firm for quite some time now. He started with Kalari as a venture fellow, where he was selected in India, and now at Venture Highway, a Millenial Philosopher. Additionally, he runs a community of investors called Venture Folks, and he has worked with more than 30 plus startups, early stage startups till date. So Akul, I was wondering how old you are.
Thanks for the introduction, man. I'm 23, so that's there.
Wow. So we can. It'll be right to say that you have worked with startups more than your age.
Yeah, I think that would be a fair assertion. Yeah.
So as they say, age is just a number. To all the 23-year-old, all the students, all the professionals, I think startups teaches you a lot in terms of failure and successes both, and also in terms of your life. So, how many startups have you worked for? That's a question to think about. Reply in comments. So Akul, let's talk about Kalari, right? Kalari, you were selected as a venture fellow there, right? And so Kalari is one of the biggest venture which invests in early stage tech companies, right? So Akul, tell us about, like, they have investments in PureFit, Dream11, and so many companies. How was your experience there, right? How did it change your perception of looking at a startup deal, or like as a startup as a
Got it. No, definitely. I was among the fortunate few who got selected as part of the Kalari Fellowship, right? In terms of Kalari being an institution of repute, started as one of the oldest VC firms, actually. I think 2006, first wave of venture capital in India.
Right.
And Vani herself is a serial entrepreneur. She has built two companies. One of them, I think, was acquired for about $700 million. So when you get to learn from people like her, it's a privilege for sure. I think coming from outside, right, a lot of us think that venture capital is a job where you sit at a position of privilege, where you sit as an investor. There are people who are pitching their ideas to you, and you are the one who get to decide, right? You are an adjudicator of capital. I think that perspective, and I'm glad that it got broken so quickly, that glass got shattered the moment I started working at the fund, because at the end of the day, not just as an analyst, but I think investor at every level, you're not an adjudicator. You are actually a salesman of capital, right?
Right.
What you are doing is you're trying to tell a founder that I am the right partner for you. So what you are doing is you're trying to sell your capital to them in exchange for equity. You are trying to prove your worth to them as a valued investor.
Right.
So I think that perception change was of a magnitude that I did not expect in my very first week. Now, in terms of how used to look at startups, I think the respect for entrepreneurs, I've worked with so many collegiate founders, fortunate to have done that. I think that just continues to compound. But when you're at Kalari, you're seeing people who were 15 or 20 years into the industry. They've worked on the finance space, they've worked in the insurance space, they've worked in the food space, and now they're leaving their comfort zone to build an enterprise so that the lives of the likes of you and me could be better. I think there is nothing more humbling than that. The ability and the grit to start over at that age. And even for younger founders to leave the security of everything that they have to desert so many aspirations and just have that one single point focus. I think my respect for entrepreneurs has only continued to compound. As an investor, I was fortunate, I still am fortunate to be at a place where I can watch them from close quarters and cheer for them. I think that's been my takeaway.
Okay, that's superb to hear. But just want to put a point here that in India it's considered, investors are founders are mostly vulnerable when it comes to pitching to investors or talking to investors or negotiating. But I think rightly mentioned, the times are changing with more and more founders coming in, more and more even micro VC firms coming, which are investing in even, let's just say, student-based startups who don't actually have any pedigree so far, no work ex, but then just taking a risk, investing their risk capital at such stage is what I think every small change is impacting the Indian startup ecosystem in a way. So if you have to, so you've been, you've worked in the one of the best VC firm, right? So I'm sure you can tell us, uh, if you have to personally invest in a startup, right? What is that one thing you would look for?
That's an interesting question.
Maybe you have a call with founder, like some people look at the like pedigree of the founder, team, business idea, but what is it, that one thing that you have to look for, like for you personally it matters?
Got it. No, that's an interesting question, right? I think everyone, and this is something I've learned over the past couple of months, is that everyone has their own mental model, or everyone has their own rubric of how to evaluate, right? And what you look for. For me, I think it has to be the obsession of the founder. Startup journeys are so hard, right? Like you rightly said, right? There are so many founders today, and there is that perception that you're at the mercy of investor capital. But at the end of the day, the type of founders, and because of this, they are very vulnerable, right? Too many founders, and of course there's capital, but at the end of the day, you're still vulnerable to a lot of external infusions. Your business may be going great, but if there's no follow-on capital, you might be stuck at a stage, right? It could happen with a lot of great businesses.
Right.
So your ability to continue building, your ability to not stop, that does not come from having a sense of that there lies a pot of gold at the end of this rainbow. It comes from your obsession, from your passion to solve a problem. That also translates to the vision that you can showcase for your team, for external investors, for your customers. That also goes into then showing that I have a single-minded focus in terms of the one problem that I want to solve. I am not building a feature set. I am solving one major problem for one set of consumers. And that obsession, that paranoia in some sense, I think is what I would look for. Are you passionate enough that when the going gets tough, and it definitely will, right? It will get tough. When the going gets tough, will you continue working towards that?
Right. So I remember I was interviewing one of the founder, and he mentioned that that there's a lot of motivation in the market, right? But persistence is rare. Everyone is passionate about doing things, but there's no tenacity, no persistence to keep doing that even when things are not working as expected, and it happens in the startup. Majority, like all the startups are they reach to a success through failures, right? Right. Uh, Akul, right after Kalari, you moved to Venture Highway, right? And one of the interesting thing when I was reading about you that caught my attention was the title, Millennial Philosopher. So, what is it? Like, we want to know what is it about? If you can tell us a bit.
Got it. So I was very fortunate to have joined the team here at Venture Highway. Amazing culture, just working with the best set of people here. And one of the things, and which is where the title comes from, is a philosophy. The philosophy dictates that generally you have designations in every fund, right? There's an analyst, there's an associate, VP, principal partner. Generally, that's these five designations, which also in the sense reflects that founders want to only talk to people at a certain designation, right? Founders are advised actively, right? I think Paul Graham has written about this, that please do not talk to associates. Please talk to partners at a VC fund, right? and even those partners who have a thesis in your space. Just fine. So
Right.
the idea at Venture Highway was to actually tell the world that it is not just something that we believe in, that we are a horizontal or a flat organization. We will continue to promote that notion by not having formal titles for anyone based on designation. So the idea is that when you sit in an investment committee meeting, you are challenging everyone's notions, everyone's hypothesis, supplying information. So to truly reflect that mindset of equality among all members who are sitting on the table, who have a seat at that table, I think that is one of the most amazing ways to promote this, that not just internally, that we are just saying this, even externally, you will be known as one of the many members of the team.
Interesting.
And so, yeah, that is how we decided to ditch the naming convention and come up with a title. For Millennial Philosopher, this title was actually suggested to me by a friend who I've worked with for about 5 to 6 months before this at Kalari. And the idea actually goes on to saying, what is it that you do? What is it that you think your job in a sense is? And thinking at the end of the day, it is having a sense or having some sort of prognostication, having a philosophy around, which all boils down to having a philosophy around a certain set of axioms, right? What is your philosophy around those certain set of axioms? And and everyone has that. The differentiating factor for me perhaps is that I'm younger than most people here. So I said, all right, fine, let's just espouse the generation as well. So hence the Millennial Philosopher as a title came about.
So is there any other interesting title in Venture Highway as well, like apart from?
No, yeah, I think everyone has interesting titles. So my colleague Parth, his title is actually Venture Knight, right?
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, I think everyone has interesting titles at Venture Highway. It's just the
Nice,
culture.
nice, nice to see someone coming up with new investment trends in the world. So can you tell us some of the Venture Highways portfolio companies like currently which are in the portfolio? So I was reading like Meesho is one of your portfolio companies. So can you name a few like for us?
Yeah, sure. Off the top of my head, there's of course Meesho is there, Moglix is there, MPL.
But usually,
Then
like which industry? So every VC firm has their investment thesis. So does Venture Highway, has a dominant investment in a particular sector where they feel that they are more comfortable investing in this sector, or like
no,
yeah.
I completely understand that. I think from a thesis perspective, our
Mm,
idea is just to look for tech investments, and
mm,
which is software plays. So we
mm,
only look at software plays. Now, how that reflects in terms of the sector or industry, we're fairly
mm,
agnostic about that. So
mm,
functionally, sectorally, we are agnostic.
mm.
But
Okay.
idea is, what are the software plays that you're looking at
Mm,
across industries, across functions? One
mm,
more thing that we're working towards today very actively is looking at D2C as a sector
mm,
and
mm,
trying to
mm.
understand and develop a thesis around that. So I think
Mm.
that's an active involvement that we're working towards, based because of our experience with consumer tech, because of our experience with social commerce at Meesho. So we're
Right.
trying to work in that direction as well.
So, Akul, I was reading about this consumer pattern behavior and how investments, funds are reacting to it. So, like you mentioned, D2C, right? So, similarly, there are funds like Sequoia who are coming up with alternative thesis, right, for specific investment into industries which are really small in size, right? But then there, like it doesn't have a potential to go to billions. For example, like earlier people used to go to Flipkart for everything. Now they want specifics. They want probably for groceries they'll go to Big Basket. For makeup they'll go to, for books they want a specific book thing, right? For makeup there is Nika. For clothing there is another one. So everyone is looking for specific. So the consumer pattern report suggests that people are more driving towards niche market sizes. So in D2C space specifically, is can we see a trend coming where more investments are going into smaller businesses which has potential to to scale to a level, and but then not beyond that, because they will never have a big market of their own. For example, if I talk about let's just say art space, right? Art space in D2C is very broken right now, right? So like are in Venture Highway, are you also exploring these areas, or like any other fund is exploring these areas?
Got it. So I'll give you a general market perspective, right?
Mm, mm,
I agree with the trend that you have put forth, which is, and this is something that is actually sector agnostic.
mm,
Every time we start with what is known as a horizontal layer. A
mm,
horizontal layer could be around, let's say, e-commerce, right?
mm,
When we say
mm.
that we are taking commerce from offline to online, that's a
Right,
horizontal layer.
right.
When we said that we're building a social network,
Mm,
Facebook was a horizontal social network,
mm.
right? But over time, what happens is that specific verticals within these horizontals become so large that it becomes viable to separate them and build them into their own businesses, which is
Right,
what, as you were talking about, which is Nika, which is the Good Glam group has
right,
recently become a unicorn, right?
right,
Mama Earth is almost there as
right.
well. So the problem here is not that funds are not looking at, let's say, small businesses
Mm,
or let's say niche businesses, right?
mm,
Idea is that we all, I think, fundamentally agree that the consumers of tomorrow will
mm.
end up purchasing goods that are very tailored to them, not just based on the product itself, but the product philosophy at large. So you're looking at that very specific alignment
Mm,
that I want, let's say, for a fashion brand, I want 25 to 45-year-old working women to consume my products. So the
mm.
philosophy of the brand is very specific.
Right.
Then you have for the canine space that I want
Mm,
to operate in this specific vertical. So the other part of, so I mean, then niche categories.
mm.
The moment we see that there's a niche category that is expected to grow, all VCs are going to be there, right? The other part of this equation is, will we continue to invest in as a community, right? Will we continue to invest in spaces that will continue to be small,
Mm,
right? I think venture as a risk capital is not suited to these asset classes,
mm,
right? When you look at businesses that will continue to be small, they will
mm.
likely end up being lifestyle businesses.
Right.
And so for our 10-year investment horizon, 10 plus 2,
Mm,
idea is that you do not end up looking at those investments because you are not looking at a 3x return on invested capital. You have to go for moonshots to balance out the
right,
return across the fund.
right, right.
So given that they're a different risk class because
Mm,
they're growing at that pace, the kind of risk that they're having to mitigate are on a
mm,
different scale, let's say. So
mm.
there, I think it's not venture. I think angel investors have come up. Some of them are taking those small bets. Some small
Right,
micro VCs are also doing
right,
these because for them, the idea is that even $100 million outcome makes sense,
right,
not $1 billion outcome. For an
right.
angel investor, a 10 million outcome might make sense.
Yeah.
So it depends on the horizon that you have and the outcome that will give you that return that you need on the risk capital that you're giving.
Sounds fair enough. So so like you told, like Venture Highway, you must be working with your portfolio companies, I'm sure. Like apart from talking to new founders, so venture as part of VC world, you also have to sometimes help your portfolio companies, be with them as an entrepreneur yourself, right? So tell me one thing, like working with such great founders, like Venture Highway has a great portfolio. So, what is that one thing you really admire about founders, entrepreneur as in general, and what is that one thing you don't like about them?
Got it. Actually, I will take a step back here from Venture
Mm.
Highway portfolio itself, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I think what I'll
Like
do is
I'm asking in general, like
yeah,
like you with Red Herring, you work with more than 30. I don't know. You work with probably with more than 50, 100 founders you have worked with so far, right? There must be something you really admire about them. There's this trait that it can only be found in a creator or in a founder, and this
got it.
is something I really admire, and it keeps you motivated or things like that. So, what is that one thing which you admire about them?
I think it goes back to the initial question, right? What is the one thing that you look for or the one thing
Uh,
that you admire? I think it's
mm,
in some way intertwined with that.
mm,
The one thing that I look for, as I said,
mm,
was passion, right?
mm,
Passion,
mm,
persistence, and as you rightly said, tenacity to
mm,
actually push through. with the goal. I think the other side of this is what is the basic, right? What is the one thing that you will continue to admire that forms the base of all good founders? And I think that is resilience.
Anything you don't like about founders in general?
No, I think the only thing I would say to all founders is I'm grateful, right? Because, and this is something that Nassim Taleb has talked about a lot. Every time you have a lot of people actually start something, right? While individually they may be vulnerable, right? Their businesses may be vulnerable to change, but as an ecosystem, you become anti-fragile. As an ecosystem, we celebrate Teachers' Day, Independence Day, Father's Day, Mother's Day, right? We celebrate our birthdays. I think there should be at least one National Day for Entrepreneurship, which is where we just celebrate founders. That's it, because they are the ones who are taking us forward, and the kind of risks, both personal and professional, that they take to do it is just admirable.
I think there is one World Entrepreneurship Day, but I
The
don't think
national
but people celebrate it or not. I'm not sure quite in India. But then, no, great. I really like how you bounce off from the question. But then, when we talk about obsession with a problem, and a founder, a quality you admire about founders, do you think obsession comes when you personally have faced a problem, or can there be a delta created for it, like whether you have not faced it or people are facing and you feel the same pain for it, like, because I personally feel that only once you have observed something, right, and you genuinely believe, like, there's a problem, that's when you get obsessed about it. So sometimes what happens is people just pick any random problem and then they start obsessing about the solution rather than the problem. So that there's flip side to it as well. So what do you think about it? Like, obsession in which way is better?
Got it. No, I think I'll decouple this, right? Two parts to it. Number one, should you have faced the problem statement yourself, right? Should you have been exposed to the problem yourself? Answer to that question is no. You could have faced the problem yourself. You could have not faced the problem yourself. Someone could have faced the problem, right? Which is a second degree, but there could also be a third degree where you're not even associated with the problem in any manner, but you're just passionate about it, right? So the passion can actually be decoupled from having faced the problem statement or observed the problem statement. What you need to look for, I think, is a sense of passion for that obsession with the problem statement. How does that come about? It does not have to be that you face the problem yourself, but how much, let's say, work is it that you have done to understand that this is a problem statement, this should not be there, right? There are founders who just looked at problem statements and said, this does not make sense. I will take the example of a trucking company, right? They just said, why are my goods taking 4 days to ship from location A to location B? It makes no sense. The number of kilometers is X, right? You have, let's say, at a 60 kilometer hour, it's a 2400 kilometers distance that has to be covered. It's a 40-hour journey. Why is it taking 4 days? Because you have a trucker who's driving for 10 to 14 hours, then they have to rest, right? It's very simple. What if you actually disintermediated this? You added multiple stops. Truckers will change, and then you deliver it to this. So then it actually gets bridged out into a day and a half. Now, the person who could have done this does not actually have to be a trucker themselves. They don't even have to be exposed to truckers as a family of drivers. But what they need to be obsessed about is, why does this inefficiency exist even today? What can I do to change it? And then obsession that actually makes them question and go deep, right? One of the examples I remember very fondly is of one of the older senior management team members of Tata Trucks, right? Everyone would wonder, where is he? We can't see him in the office in the lunch hours. We want to talk to him. We want to set meetings. You would find him actually at a dhaba talking to truck drivers, right? He would be talking to them. What are the problems that you're facing with your truck? How can I solve this? And that is the obsession I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So he was not a truck driver. He did not face that problem. He did not even have a truck driver in the family.
Right. But he was obsessed to a level where he would
exactly
do anything to solve that inefficiency. Right.
Exactly.
I think that's a prime entrepreneur mindset, that everyone should have. And I think India is slowly building up that mindset. I see
Yeah.
a lot of students having that mindset. I have spoken to a lot of students who are doing, like, when we were a student, like, I've talked about myself. When I was a student, I was hardly looking at, startups as it what is happening. But then when I look at it right now, the boom in the ecosystem is so huge that the information gap is also it's also decreasing. Now, coming to information gap, let's talk about fundraising. It's one of the biggest question for every upcoming entrepreneur, right? That he wants to get a know-how about. So, I read this interesting tweet about Paytm founder. He tweeted about a guy and who was so desperate that he had sent multiple emails, referrals, cold email messages to like almost all the VCs in India, right? And he claimed that he's building number one toy company in India, right? One of the biggest toy company, but he was unable to raise funds. So just want to understand what is the right way, or probably what a founder should not do while approaching investors, right, for raising funds. If you're at an idea stage, you build an MVP right now. What is the right, what is something you should not do while approaching investors? What works, what not works.
Got it. No, that's an interesting one, right? What I'll do is I'll talk about the rights, what you should do.
Yeah.
Way back, I think about 14, 15 years back, probably around the time when we had the first mushrooming of VC firms and startups. Problem was that there was not enough communication between VC firms and the rest of the world. So it was a very opaque ecosystem, and you had to do cold reach outs, maybe get a reference to a venture capital firm. So you never knew their mindset in advance. You would approach them, you would pitch your idea, and maybe they like it, maybe they don't like it, but that time investment that you've done in the process is gone.
Yeah.
But there were a few firms that it was fine back then. Today, the number of firms, if there were 25, today it's 250. So you can't give half an hour to every one of those 250 firms.
Right.
Likewise, number of startups has gone from 400 to 40,000. Right? From a startup perspective as well, each VC cannot look at or provide the same amount of time to each startup.
Right.
That just time dynamics will never allow that.
Right.
What you have to do instead, and in today's world it's very possible, is whatever you're building, every VC fund is tweeting, right? Is on LinkedIn. Partners are on LinkedIn, analysts, associates, VPs, someone is on LinkedIn or Twitter, and they're talking about it, talking about what they like to invest in, talking about what they're looking at. So you get a mindset, right? What will their alignment be towards? So your job, I think, to get an investment from one of these funds, it's fine that you can get a reference to a partner at a fund and there will be a conversation and so on, but that does not solve the problem of whether they will be aligned at all or not. Do your homework. See what funds actually are aligned with what you're trying to do. You will definitely get a flavor of it. Given how much content there is, you will get a flavor for it. Once you have a flavor, out of the 250 VC firms, you shortlist the X number that you want to speak to. These are the ones who are aligned to my ask in terms of the money that they invest. They are aligned in terms of the sector that I'm building in. They're aligned towards the business model. In some sense, they've given that indication via Twitter, and they look for the same set of personality traits in a founder. Once you use all of these filters, you will end up with a handful of firms that you think will work for you. And once you have that handful of firms, you write to each one of them. So even if you don't have a warm connect there, you don't have a partner level or a VP level introduction there, it does not matter anymore. Because you've done your work, you will be very well aligned to that one investor in that firm who you write to. And when you write to them, they will agree at least with the thesis that you're presenting, because you've seen that they agree with it. Then that conversation will definitely go forward. And so it saves you a lot of time. Instead of sending your pitch deck to 250 VCs, filling their forms, please do spend that time on Twitter or LinkedIn. Please spend 10 hours or one day, just one day, go through their tweets, go through their LinkedIn posts, see whether you find an alignment. Once you have that alignment in terms of mindset, everything else can be worked out. But just have that alignment before you write to them will save you a lot of time and a lot of cold conversations with people who will not be aligned with what you're trying to ask for.
So I think it's equally important, like it is important for investors to pick the right set of portfolio companies. I think it's equally important for founders also to pick the right set of investors,
Absolutely.
rather than just going ahead and raising stupid money.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's something. And there's a myth also in the market that money can guarantee you success, and that's why mostly founders do raise stupid money, right? In terms of, I don't know, maybe sometimes they are create solving a wrong problem, and sometimes there can be multiple reasons. But coming to that, you have seen both side of the coins. You've been an entrepreneur also, right? You have worked with so many entrepreneurs. Let's bust some myths, right? And let's talk about funding. Like, there's funding doesn't guarantee you success. Even people think that they can raise funds, but they will still not be successful. It's the execution that matters, right? So can you tell us something on comment on this, and tell us what exactly, how can you build a business with without money?
I'm not sure I can say how do you build a business without money, right? But I will tell you something. 10, 15 years back, we were at a very nascent stage in the ecosystem where to get up a minimum viable product, you had to have an engineer or you had to knew how to write code.
Yes.
Today, with the kind of developments we are at, you can build your logo on Canva. You can set up your professional site using a Wix or a GoDaddy, right? And you can use one of the several no-code, low-code tools like Zapier to set up your product. You can use Slack or Discord for your community. So what is it that you need today to actually present an MVP to someone? There is everything is available already. So that friction has reduced, right? So you can build a basic business without money. Part of it, and I will, I've learned this, I heard this from Sanjeev Vikchandani sir, right, at one of his events. He was talking about in the initial days of Naukri, there were obviously no companies who were publishing their openings on a portal, right? But you had to do this. So how would you go about it? How would you tell them, please give me your job openings, I will put this on the internet?
Right.
For them, it was not making sense. So what he instead did was, these ads would come in newspapers. He would manually input all of those ads from newspapers to the website.
Right. Oh.
Now, you don't need money to do that. All you need is hustle. In the initial days of Uber, the founding team manually onboarded each black cab driver. Manually, each of them, right? In the initial days of Tinder, you got the app downloads by actually organizing parties on campus. All of this was manual. There was a bouncer who wouldn't let you inside the frat house until you downloaded the app. That is exactly how it all started. So all of this needs some of these need some capital. You need some server costs, etc. But it does not need massive amounts of capital, right? You need maybe 10, 20, 50,000 rupees to organize some of these, right?
Right.
And most people can shell that kind of money to build a startup. It may not be as hard to raise that kind of money, but they did this when tech was not a thing. Today, you can build anything and everything under the sun with low code, no code tools, right? You have so many free software subscriptions that you can start out your business with absolutely nothing. You get AWS and GCP credits as well. So what is stopping you today? You can build a business at least the outset of it without any money. And money in general, I think there's a huge perception gap, right? You rightly said money does not guarantee success. You should raise money only when money is the only bottleneck to your success, right? You should raise money if without that source of capital, you have everything else solved, which is I have the right set of team members, I have the right set of people with me, I have the right set of customers to pitch to, I've identified that, I have the product to ship, but I still need money to be able to do all of these exercises. That is the right point in time to raise money. Do not raise money for the sake of it. Raise money when it is the only bottleneck to your success or to the growth of your venture. So that is the mindset I firmly believe in.
Right. And I think now you've given me a teaser to my interview where I'll use this definitely. So, but I would love to hear your views on, one thing that, most of the founders don't actually prepare for in an early stage, right? Is how to build a competitive advantage, right? They think about solution, but then what is that one thing that protects them from their competitors, right? So if you can comment about Moat, what's your take on this, and like how can why is it important, and how does Moat and scalability come together in the picture, right? Because I remember, even Moat cannot necessarily be just, let's just say a technology or an algorithm or something. Even speed is a moat, right? If I remember one founder saying that if you know how fast you're going, and if you know the time when to double down on the speed, right, when to double down on growth, that is a speed, and that is most underestimated moat. So if you can comment on that.
Got it. No, that is super interesting, right? Thinking about moat or thinking about competitive advantage, there are so many ways to build it. I think one thing that people do is they think combining a feature set is a moat, right? Um, I think the moat is either product or distribution. Now, product could be a set of features, but what you need is actually an excellent product. It may not have every feature that an existing product does. For instance, let us talk about let us talk about Zoom. When Zoom came in the market as a video conferencing solution, you had Skype, you had so many others. Why was another video conferencing product needed, right? But then you use that as a product. It was a 10x better experience to host video conferences. Why?
Right.
Because you did not have to invite someone. There was a simple password and a meeting link anyone could plug into and play.
Right.
This was just a downloadable software, or you could even use your browser to do it, right? Skype, everyone had to download the app in some sense, and it was very buggy. But when you 10x that user experience itself, you today, I think it's worth, I don't know what, some 50 billion odd dollars. And so idea is you built that superior product. So that was your moat, right? In terms of a product set. The other thing is the distribution set, right? Which is dating apps. Let's talk about that. Everyone knows that dating app to build is not that complicated, right? Today, you can get the code from anyone. What is complicated is getting distribution, activating the networks around this, the hyper local networks. Because let's say you live in Gurgaon, right? There are 50 people from Gurgaon on the dating app. There are 50 people from Ghaziabad on the dating app. You have technically 100 users, but will these users actually interact with each other? Because of the distance, there is a high probability that even when there's a match, they might not ever end up meeting up.
Right.
So you have to have that density within each hyper-local network, which is in Gurgaon, I need 5,000 people. In Ghaziabad, I need another 5,000 people.
Right.
So that distribution then becomes your advantage, which is how do you pull in that distribution? And that distribution compounds, right? If I have 5,000 people on a network, I have a much higher probability of finding a potential match on that network because liquidity is high.
Right.
And as more people get added, that distribution compounds.
Right.
Same is the case with Uber, right? Uber is one of the most phenomenal examples of this. Cab hailing as a product to build was not that tough, right? We had so many players come up in different markets, but Uber today still is the largest global player. Why is that? Uber focused obsessively on building these micro networks, on building liquidity and density within a specific networks, right? One of the examples that I read about recently is once they were facing this driver crunch in one of their hyperlocal networks. And this was a very small market. What they did instantly, right? They track these metrics obsessively. Instantly, they increased the driver referral bonus from $250 to $750 in the span of one meeting. It's a 3x increase in the driver referral. Why? Because they wanted to solve that micro network problem. They're that obsessively focused on these micro networks. And so you have to have that kind of a mindset, which is it my product? Is it my distribution? Something has to be your competitive advantage. There could be many others, but you have to be aware of what is your competitive advantage today. What is it going to be at scale? Some people say, come for the feature, stay for the network, which is a lot of products work that way, right? Dropbox is a great example
Right.
of that. You came for the feature, you wanted to sync your files between every system you use and the cloud, but you stayed for the network because you could share the access across users.
Yeah.
So just think about what your moat is going to be at the start, at scale. And yeah, definitely do think about both the product and the network effects that can happen.
So I think it's one of the best answer to understand moat. Moat doesn't necessarily have to be anything else. It can be either your product or distribution. So talking about dating apps, are you on a dating app too? Which app do you use?
No, I'm not on a dating app.
Okay. So you run a investor community,
Yeah.
right? So tell us about, I'm sure, like, what is it about? What is Venture Folks? And what do people talk about on that community, right? There's a group of 200 investors, right? So far. So what do investors actually talk about? Do they share deals, or is there any, what is it that Venture Folks do?
Yeah. No,
And
that's
how can someone join it if there's any investor listening to this? Yeah.
yeah. No, so Venture Folks actually started when there were a couple of us, right? 2, 3 of us, new investors in the ecosystem under 25. We all just started out and we were thinking, how do we get guidance? Who do we learn from? And the idea is VC community is so opaque, not even just for outsiders, even for insiders who are invested into the ecosystem. You do not necessarily know what is the right thing to do or what is the right set of approaches to take as a new investor, right? How, and one of the constant questions that you get asked is, how do you build deal flow, for instance, right? How do you get the right set of deals? How do you meet the right set of people? And so the idea with Venture Folks was, let's just get together a group of people so that we can help each other out with these problems. Someone may have figured something out, right? We started with that, grew from 4 people to 12, and it was very selective. We were just adding people who would contribute a lot to the community. That number then just snowballed to where we are today. There are more than 200 active members on the WhatsApp community. We have 170 people on our Slack community as well. And it's just anything and everything. If you're a new VC, whatever it is that you want, you can just reach out to anyone at any fund, right? And learn about, let's say, a specific investment that they did, which is today, if I want to learn about this company called Swiggy, I can definitely write to anyone at Axel, right? If I want to learn about Dream 11, I can write to anyone at Kalari. If I want to learn about Oyo, I can write to anyone at Lightspeed or Sequoia. If you want to learn about, let's say, an MPL, you can write to us, right? You can write to me at Venture Highway. So you get that kind of access that you do not necessarily have as a new investor. So idea is, how do you create that for people? Second part of that is, of course, that there is a lot of knowledge sharing that happens, right? Across funds, there are people who are looking at different sectors, which is you're looking at fintech, you're looking at health tech, creator economy, and everyone is looking at the same set of sectors.
Right.
But it might be hard for some people to start over, right? When you're working on the time cycles that we do, which is deals are moving in 2 days.
Right.
How do you build, or how do you source the right data points? Everyone will have a different opinion, but you need the right set of data points to form that opinion.
Right.
So anyone in the community can help you out with that, which is
I think that's the power of community. Sometimes you get insights which you can never get on internet also. So that's those insights and those experiences can compound to your decisions
right
at the end of the
absolutely.
day. So I think let's move to our final round. So we do a rapid fire with our guests, right? And so I'll quickly ask you questions and give you a few options to it. So if you like to see two founders starting a company together, who would that be?
That's an interesting one. I would say Kunal Shah and Harshan.
Okay, and why?
No, I think the vision of Kunal and the kind of execution machine that Harsh has built with Dream 11, I think it would be super amazing. Plus, they both understand consumer psychology a little too well. I think if both of them were to come together we will end up with, I don't know, what would you call that enterprise? Because a decacorn sounds too low.
Okay. And so my second question is, which one? So I read it in Sikoa, when I went to one of a call, and there was this question. So I want to ask you, which one of these ideas would you pick? Okay. So listen to this carefully. One that can dominate small share of larger market, or one that can dominate a larger share of a smaller market. So which one of the idea would you pick to start a firm?
I think I would pick the second one.
So larger share of a smaller market.
Yeah.
Okay. So whatever you do, rule. Like be dominant. Okay. So next thing is, what would be VC's popular choice of drink? Is it whiskey, scotch, wine, or vodka?
No, I think it ends up being wine is, I think, the drink of choice for VCs. But that's based on my limited experience in person.
Yeah.
We don't
Yeah.
meet that often in
Yeah.
person at all.
What's your choice of drinks?
Yeah, no, I think that's a question best left unanswered.
Okay. If you have to choose one for yourself, okay.
Hmm.
Akul, an investor,
Hmm.
a founder, or a catalyst?
Yeah. I think I'll always like to be a founder, but there's time to get that.
Okay. Okay. So thanks, Akul. Thanks for being on the show. It was indeed my pleasure talking to you. And there were so many interesting stories you've told us, right? Starting from Tinder to Zoom to Tata Trucks. I think it's one of the best interview I've ever had. And let's see. It's my first interview, so I'll see how it goes in the future also. Right. So thank you for your time. Okay.
It's a pleasure being here, Aman. Pleasure being here.